Hey guys, so the bill to make the District of Columbia the 51st state in the Union has just passed the House of Representatives. And, today I want to take a look at, whether or not this bill can actually pass the Senate. Because once it passes the Senate, DC will become the next state in the United States very, very soon. It'll happen faster than you may think. They're going to have to think of a new name that's pretty irrelevant for right now. It's really just about getting it past the Senate. And although there is the filibuster, it is technically possible for Democrats, if they really wanted to move past the filibuster without completely abolishing it and getting the statehood for DC to be passed, which would benefit the Democrats immensely. It would basically give them 2 seats in the Senate because the District of Columbia is really very, very liberal, and there is no way the Republicans will ever win the seat, and no Republican on the presidential level has ever won the nation's capital. So looking at DC statehood here, it recently passed just 2 days ago with a vote of 216 to 208. So 216 to 208, not a single Republican voted to make DC a state. And so looking at the House results from 2020, it was 222 for Democrats, 213 for Republicans. Of course, there were, quite a few members who did not show up, who did not vote, because, there's 435 people in there. So, definitely it's pretty plausible that that's, some people don't show up for some reason. But there were 218 seats that were needed to control the House. The Democrats only got 216, so they didn't get a majority of it, but there were more out of those who did vote. So that is why, out of these votes here, 216, 208, the bill to make DC a state did pass the House of Representatives, and on the Senate level, they do need Senate confirmation. Typically, they would need 60 votes because of the filibuster. Essentially, what the filibuster is that the Senate allows for as much discussion as possible. So, you can discuss a bill literally forever. As long as you get the members of one party to keep discussing it, you can discuss a bill for, eternity. And so for that discussion to end, you need 60 votes. You need 3/5 of the Senate to end that discussion on some bill. And so that is why the filibuster exists. But now people don't even talk anymore. You just need to, say that you will filibuster, and then the other party will basically back down on whatever they're trying to do, because there's no way they're getting 10 members of the opposite party to do so, because right now the Senate is split 50-50. The last time, Democrats were even close to getting 60 seats was in the Senate election in 2008 with the election of Barack Obama. In 2008 with Barack Obama, the Democrats controlled 59 seats, the Republicans 41. And even in this case, if every single Republican voted no on a bill, if 41 Republicans opposed something and they threatened to use the filibuster, there was no way this was going to pass, because the Democrats, they still needed 60. It has to be 60. It has to be 3/5 of the Senate, not anything less. So for the Senate, for the Democratic senators in the Senate, they can still get through this. There is something called the nuclear option, which is basically a congressional loophole that can get the Democrats past the filibuster, and all they would need is a majority, or 50 seats, plus the vice presidency, plus the vice president Kamala Harris would break the tie. She does, she will support DC statehood if it really does come to that. Her and Biden have both supported it in the past. So if she does vote for it, the Democrats will be able to get this past the Senate. But it's just really whether or not, question whether or not they do this, because this would set a precedent, and the Republicans, they would definitely have to come back with something, make something else a state. But for the nuclear option, essentially what it does is it changes the rules for something specific to pass. In 2013, this was done by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Basically, what he did was for lower level court appointments for judges and justices of smaller courts than the Supreme Court. Basically, what you could do was they only needed 50 votes for a confirmation of these judges and lower ranking court officials. And then when Mitch McConnell wanted to get Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch passed, he also invoked the nuclear option to make it so that Supreme Court justices only needed 50 votes to pass. So that is why Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh both were able to pass the U.S. Senate. And so that's why they're both on the Supreme Court now. The same thing for Amy Coney Barrett. Without that, Amy Coney Barrett would not be on the Supreme Court of the United States. So so basically Democrats, technically, if they really did want to, they could get DC statehood past through the Senate. Now, this would be if every single senator does vote for it. Really, as of right now, this is the current Senate. As you can see, there are two independents in Maine and Vermont. In Maine, you have Angus King, and in Vermont, you have, of course, Bernie Sanders, but they are pretty liberal, and they always caucus with the Democratic Party. So right now, most Republicans, every single Republican is expected to vote no. Not a single Republican is going to break that party line because it really is very against them, this whole DC statehood bill. And so for the two senators that are really on the edge for the Democrats, Mark Kelly, he's indicated that he may not be as supportive of it as many of his colleagues, but Mark Kelly, at the end of the day, he will vote for DC statehood. But it's really Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, as well as Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Joe Manchin, who interestingly lives in a boathouse in DC. So there's been plans of people who are going to show up at his boathouse to protest and try to get him to vote for this. But Joe Manchin definitely is the one that is most against it in the Senate for the Democrats. Kyrsten Sinema also pretty against it. And they really don't seem to care whether or not the Democrats really want this. I mean, Joe Manchin endorsed Lisa Murkowski for re-election in Alaska, and she's a Republican. So these two, they really don't seem to care so much. I mean, Kyrsten Sinema is known for having a lot of friends on the right. So yeah, these two senators, they're probably going to vote no, in my opinion. I really do not expect them to vote yes. I think that the Democrats could get one of them to sway, but realistically, I do not believe that these two, Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema, are going to invoke the nuclear option to make this work. So I think that if it was just 50 that were needed, I think that they might, but I don't think they're going to support using the nuclear option to get DC to become a state. But we'll see what happens for Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But definitely could change. This could change. They could definitely change their mind for whatever reason. They are still Democrats, and at the end of the day, even though they're more conservative, they are still members of the Democratic Party. I mean, Joe Manchin, if he switched and became a Republican, he would be very, very popular in West Virginia. I mean, this state voted for Donald Trump by over 40% in 2016. So Joe Manchin, he could have made his life so much easier, but he is a Democrat. He is not a Republican, and that really hasn't helped him many times. He almost lost his re-election in 2018 and will face a pretty tough challenge in 2024. So before we go any further, make sure you join my Discord server if you have not, the link to which is at the very top of the description below. So now this map right here, I want to go over what DC statehood will really look like for the Senate. So if the District of Columbia really does become a state, the Democrats would essentially gain 2 seats. I'll go over why that is later, but as you can see, the Democratic Party, they would have 52 seats, the Republicans with 50 if you added the 2 seats from the District of Columbia, because every single state, no matter what the population is, will get 2 seats in the U.S. Senate. This would make it so that you would need 51 votes to have a majority for the Democrats, because they do have the vice presidency, and you would need 52 if you want to have outright control without needing a tiebreaker. So the Democrats, they would control 50 to the Republicans with 50, which means that in this case, I mean, Joe Manchin, who's the one that mostly votes against the Democrats, if Joe Manchin decides to vote against the bill, Democrats would still have 50. If Joe Manchin votes with the Republicans, Democrats would still have 50, and they could still get things passed. But still, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin together, they could still block anything the Democrats do want to do. But one of them now cannot, because in the current Senate, if one of them votes no, if Joe Manchin votes no, then essentially that thing is going to fail. So in this new Senate, it would definitely benefit Democrats, and it would benefit them in 2022 as well, of course. But looking at the District of Columbia, I mean, in 2020, Joe Biden won 92% of the vote there. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 90%. Trump won 4%. Trump won 4% of the vote in the nation's capital. I mean, 2012, Barack Obama also wins 92%, wins by 85.9% over John McCain, who was a senator and basically has lived there for a very long time. 2012, Romney wins 7%, but the most surprising one is 1984. This is Walter Mondale versus Ronald Reagan. Walter Mondale loses in the largest landslide in American history. Ronald Reagan wins 525 out of 538 electoral votes. Walter Mondale wins 13 electoral votes, 10 from Minnesota, which he carried by 0.18%. He won this by a couple thousand votes in Minnesota, which really is quite sad. This was his home state, and Walter Mondale won it by 0.18%. And then in the District of Columbia, he still won 85% of the vote. Joe Biden only won 92%. Walter Mondale, in the largest electoral defeat in American history, still was able to carry 85.38% of the vote in the District of Columbia. So that really is just how blue DC is. He still won it by 71.7%. So, you really just cannot stop, just how liberal the District of Columbia is. This is a district that has never voted for a Republican ever on the presidential level since it was given the right to have electoral votes in the 60s. So, making DC a state would really be a really big deal. I mean, Ronald Reagan even won states like Maryland by 2.8%, Rhode Island by 3.6%. He won New York by 8%. This was the last time New York ever went to a Republican. As you can see, in 1988, Michael Dukakis was able to flip some states back, and he won DC with 82% of the vote. So Walter Mondale even did better than Michael Dukakis in 1984 than Dukakis in 88. I mean, you go to 1992, Bill Clinton wins it by 75%. So the District of Columbia really is very blue, and it's getting bluer and bluer. Joe Biden won it by 86.8%. That is essentially comparable to Barack Obama's margin of 85.9% in 2008. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. And then looking at just how it would affect the 2022 midterm. So this is the current 2022 midterms map. The Democrats at 46 seats, the Republicans 43 seats with their safe seats. So really, these are seats that the opposite party is not going to win. The Democrats are poised to win at Nevada right now. They definitely have the advantage there. In the state of Arizona, Mark Kelly also does have the advantage in Arizona. It's a clear advantage. This puts him up at 48 seats. John Fetterman in Pennsylvania is expected to flip this seat, currently held by Pat Toomey, who is retiring. So Democrats are expected to win that seat in Pennsylvania. Republicans are expected to win in Missouri, Iowa as well as in Ohio. And then in the state of Florida, Marco Rubio is expected to win his re-election definitely. These are all pretty safe. In New Hampshire, Chris Sununu has not announced a run for the Republicans. He's the only one that can defeat Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan. But for Maggie Hassan, she does still have the advantage, putting Democrats up at 50. Democrats do also have the advantage in Georgia. And with some pretty bad candidates in North Carolina, you have Pat McCrory and Laura Trump as the two Republican frontrunners. Laura Trump, just off the bat, she is the wife of Eric Trump, son of Donald Trump. Her chances really are not that high in a general election. She was one of the top campaign officials for Trump, but the frontrunner right now is Pat McCrory, who is the former governor of the state who lost re-election to Roy Cooper in 2016 because people did not like him. So for North Carolina, Democrats, because of just how bad the Republican candidates are, I think Democrats do have the advantage there. Jeff Jackson is a strong candidate. He's the frontrunner for the Democratic nominee. He's a really good fundraiser, and I think that he definitely has a very good chance at defeating Pat McCrory, who is pretty unpopular. And then for Wisconsin, Ron Johnson has announced that he changed his mind on retiring, but he has not said that he's not going to retire. So I'm just going to assume that he's not going to retire for right now. He's not that old. He's only in his 60s. So for Ron Johnson, he would still have the advantage in Wisconsin. So even this map, Democrats have the advantage in the 2022 Senate races. Everything has just been so perfect for them. They have retirements in Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Missouri, expected in Iowa with Chuck Grassley, possible in Wisconsin with Ron Johnson. If Ron Johnson retires, he loses the incumbency for the Republicans there, and I would give the seat to the Democratic Party. Republicans have been pretty unfortunate with who's retiring in 2022. And I mean, if you add DC in here, Democrats would start off with 48. Last time they started off with 46, but now they would start off with 48 seats because DC is going to be very, very solid blue. And so basically, 48 seats for the Democrats just right off the bat. They win Nevada. They definitely have the advantage there. And in Arizona as well with Mark Kelly, who is a really popular Democrat in Arizona, puts them up at 50. They would need 51 now, of course, because there are 102 seats with DC included. So out of all these seats, they could win one. They're very unlikely to win in Missouri, very unlikely to win in Iowa, very unlikely to win in Ohio, nor Florida. But these seats, they have a very good chance in all 5 of these states. They only have to win one of them. Their highest right now, I would say, is honestly Pennsylvania. You give them their advantage in North Carolina, New Hampshire, and Georgia, and you give the Democrats 54 seats out of 102, which would be a larger majority than this one right here. So definitely this would be very beneficial for the Democratic Party, because all they would need is they would need they don't even have to win any of these tilt races. They don't have to win in North Carolina, nor Georgia, nor New Hampshire, and they would already have the control of the Senate because they do have Kamala Harris as the vice president. So this would really make the lives of the Democrats much, much easier if they were to carry all of these seats, just because of the fact that, I mean, DC is going to basically be 2 free seats for the Democrats, and that is really why the Republicans are opposed to the idea of DC statehood, and that is why not a single Republican is going to vote for statehood for the District of Columbia, even though there are hundreds of thousands of people there, larger than Wyoming, which basically gives the Republicans 2 free Senate seats. And so yeah, that's definitely going to be an issue for Democrats. They have to get Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema on board. Joe Manchin has said that he supports making Puerto Rico a state along with DC. He said that he could support that because Puerto Rico, it's more conservative. Latinos are typically more conservative just on average. But with the Democrats making it possible, Republicans are still likely to be against Puerto Rico statehood. But for the Democrats, if they do get DC to be a state, Puerto Rico would most likely vote with the Democrats originally just because they're the ones that gave Puerto Rico statehood, but after a while, they would lose that and they would, become more conservative because Puerto Ricans are more conservative just in general. Conservatives do control their government right now. So yeah, that'll basically be it for this video. One final thing I want to take a look at is the chances of DC being a state, 7 cents per share. Really? Yes, it is very, very low. But still, for DC statehood, 7 is still pretty high because it's something that, the people of DC have been trying to get for decades now, or centuries really. And then for Puerto Rican statehood, it's at 3 cents per share. So this is becoming a state in 2021. This would require the Democrats to use a nuclear option. There is no way that they're going to get basically 10 Republicans to be on board with it. So so that's basically going to be it for this video. The chances are still very low, but yes, it is technically possible, and as long as Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are on board for it, as well as other Democrats who are skeptical about the nuclear option, they can make DC a state. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to join my Discord server if you have not. The link to which is at the very top of the description below. Like this video down below if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you have not. Comment down below whether or not you think DC will become a state this year or anytime soon. And so yeah, thank you guys so much for watching again, and I will see you guys in the next video.